glad you're here today. We're in a message series called This Is Us. This is the second weekend of that, and it's a parenting series. So this is kind of like we're laying it all out there. We're trying our best, and we have picked some scriptures that are massively important to parenting and how to deal with this. And I paint in pretty broad strokes when I talk here, and so we're covering some big topics. But probably one of the best things you could do is to sign up for our This Is Us parenting seminar that's going to happen next weekend. And the deadline for that is on Tuesday. And so if you haven't registered for that, boy, probably the best spiritual thing you could do, the most investment you can make for your children's lives right there is to get involved with that. Because I guarantee you, after today's message, you're going to go, I got some questions. You did. Right? Because I don't get too specific and I don't take questions. So, yeah, you can raise your hand. I'm not calling on you. I had a guy, I've had people do that. I was like, and I actually, like, what? And he asked this question and I answered it, and people thought that I had set that up. And I had not. And so we kicked him out of the church. But truly, I mean, I can remember, like, I got a question, like, what? And like, anyway, we don't do that anymore. Now, getting a gift from somebody is always fun. I got a gift this morning, and on my office desk is a gift that my son Justin gave me probably about 15 years ago, at least when he was in school. And he made it as a pen holder, as acrylic, and it's got Dad on it and some windsurfing stuff. And I don't know why he chose windsurfing, because I've never done that. But he chose it. It's really great. And literally, the pen has never worked. Never worked. But I treasure that, and I have it there because when I look at that, I think of him, and I appreciate that, and it means a lot to me. If it had been anybody else that gave me a pen holder like that, I probably would have thrown it away. But it matters when you get a gift, from who it's from. Check this out. Psalm 127, verse 3. Children are a gift from the Lord. I'm sorry. Children are a gift from the Lord. They are rewarded from Him. So this is a big deal, right? Now, this is a gift from God. Now, it's an expensive gift. There's no doubt about that. You know that it costs $300,000 to raise a child from age, like birth to 18. $300,000, kids. That's why you can't go out to eat. Like, oh, we want to go to McDonald's. There's 4 of you here, and we're at 1.2 mil. And parents, you know this. This is true. You will never get any of that money back. They ain't like, here, I just want to kind of reimburse. Right? Now, when you bring that little angel home from the hospital, and they're cuddly and wonderful, and they melt your heart, and your heart finds room for them in your home. But these bundles of joy, these gifts from God, these innocent angels, have something in their heart that makes it very difficult to parent them. There's no exception to the rule. I know you think, not my child, because you've walked the hallways of Walmart and you've seen kids laying down. You're like, that ain't me, that's never gonna be me. And now some of you truly, you don't shop at Walmart, you gawk at Walmart, right? You just walk around like, hey, and you're like, oh, that's cool, that's funny video, But you think, that'll never be me. My kid will never do that. We'll never have to deal with that. And I talked with a dad last weekend, and he told me that he truly believed that for an hour of his child's life, after that kid had been screaming, he had 2, he said it happened to both, they were screaming for an hour. He said, I truly thought that they were demon possessed. And he wasn't kidding. He was like, I was calling a priest. Now, they weren't demon-possessed, but they were, but parenting is difficult. Check this out. Proverbs 22:15. A youngster's heart is filled with foolishness, but physical discipline will beat it out. will drive it away. Now, we're going to talk a lot about discipline next weekend, and I hope that you will come back here. I think discipline in the home is one of the things that we found when I asked you, hey, what's some of your greatest challenges and fears as a parent? A lot of you responded, I don't know if I'm doing it too much or too little. I don't know where it's appropriate, how far, what's going on. And it truly is a struggle because each kid is different. You might figure it out for one, but then there's, it is discipline in the home is a very difficult topic. Now, kids, I know there's a bunch of kids in here this morning and they're like, we're not coming next week. I'm gonna lay down in Walmart. I'm not doing this, So you got to be here for next weekend. Look forward to sharing that with us. But truly is a very difficult thing. Now, Proverbs 22:15 gives us a clue. It's because there's something in there we got to deal with. And I recently did something I never thought I would ever do as a grandparent. I went to see our grandchildren in Texas, and Aspen had just been born. And so went down there, and then Aspen's got two, brother and sister. They're 6 years old. They're twins. And we went to do what we shouldn't have done. We went to get a family portrait. And I still have nightmares from when I was a kid doing that stuff. But for some reason, hey, let's have a family portrait. Okay. And so we go to this Babies R Us place. Something has, it's like where they're doing family portraits. And it was my job to watch the 6-year-olds. While Aspen and mom and dad, and for whatever reason, grandma, had to be in, and doing that, right? And so now we had been there quite a while waiting and, all that stuff. And they had got dressed up and they don't want to be there. They really don't. They would rather be anywhere. And so it was chaos and it was embarrassing. And I didn't know what to do. And after a while, I was bribing them with money. I was trying my best because I didn't want to get arrested. And so I did something I never thought I would do. I pulled out my phone and hit YouTube app, and we watched Imagine Dragons. And if you're not unfamiliar with Imagine Dragons, you need to get familiar with Imagine Dragons because you got 6-year-olds who will be mesmerized by Imagine Dragons. Did you know that the Minions sing Imagine Dragon songs? It's a lifesaver. This is all they did. They just stared at it. It was awesome for 20 minutes. And I looked like a genius. Amazing. The sin streak in a person's heart will eventually find its way out into selfishness. And it's massively destructive to a home. So the writer of Proverbs includes you have to have some discipline in your home. If you neglect this area, if you blow this off, it'll wreak havoc, right? It truly will. Proverbs 22:6. Here's the verse we're going to talk about today. Direct your children onto the right path, and when they are older, they will not leave it. Now, that's a general truth. That's not a promise. It's not a promise. And we like to think it's a promise. And I know a lot of parents are hopeful, hey, I tried my best. I got my kid to Sunday school, did that kind of stuff, and your kid's wandering from faith. It's not very comforting. We kind of hope, I hope they find their way back to God. And it would be our prayer that they would as well. But this is a proverb, it's wisdom stuff, and we have to do our very best. You might have heard this verse like this: train up a child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. Pay attention to this, because to neglect this verse as a parent is dangerous. Let's talk about some things that we should be doing as parents. We should have a vision for what we want to do, have our kids look like when they exit at 18 or 27 or whatever it is, right? So let's talk about spiritual heritage. Now, we talk about this more in the coming weeks, but I do think that parents, Oftentimes I hear parents talk like this when it comes to spiritual stuff. I'm going to let my kids decide for themselves. And I know where that comes from because a lot of us were, like forced to go to church when we were little and we got sick and tired of it. It was boring and we didn't like it. But for the most part, what we didn't like was that mom and dad dropped us off or it didn't measure up in mom and dad's life. And so when they, you got to go to Sunday school, how come you don't? Well, because I had to when I was a kid. And so it doesn't add up. Most spiritual stuff in the home is caught not because I was taught it, but because I was modeled it. And again, when it makes sense in mom and dad's life, kids are going like, oh, okay, cool. But when it doesn't make sense in mom and dad's life, they're like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Probably more than any other fear that I heard from parents was, I want my kids to love Jesus. Kids, you need to know that the number one thing that your parents think about is, I want my kids to know and love Jesus. I saw the other day on Twitter, there was a video of this, or the picture of this toddler getting out this little mat and setting it on the ground, and the toddler was sticking his head on it. And the parents were like, we didn't know what he was doing at first, but then we realized that he had 4 Muslim teachers at his preschool, and he was just modeling that for them. And there was hundreds of comments about that, and a lot of them were very, very positive about that. And I'm not dissing on that. What I am going to tell you is that 18-month-olds are modeling what they see. So if you're not going to teach them about spiritual stuff, somebody else will. Somebody else will. So that's why here at StoneBridge, in every single classroom that we have for kids is Bible teaching, songs. They hear a lesson every weekend. It's not babysitting. We want to teach them, and we want to teach them well about spiritual stuff. That's why it's like, yes, please get them involved with it. But it should go way beyond the 45-minute we get them for, it's like, but do they see you, right? They're going to model you in your spiritual life. Another area that we should talk about, and again, you should be very concerned about spiritual stuff. Another area that as parents is like, I'm going to train my kids up is in character. Character is caught, again, more than taught, modeling for our kids what is right and what is wrong, and how to deal with conflict and honesty and integrity and race relations. Kids, they're going to see that and model that from their parents. I wanted to share you some things that I learned from my parents when they taught me. And mostly it was my mom. She was the chief teacher in our home. And she had some sayings that we still have to live by. Number 1, sometimes you do things you don't want to do. Sometimes you do things you don't want to do. Well, in my house, it was all the time we had to do things I didn't want to do. And so, but basically, she was teaching us that selfishness is a wrong way to do life. Philippians chapter 2, verse 3 says, don't be selfish. Don't try to impress others. Be humble, thinking of others as better than yourselves. And she was constantly trying to teach us, hey, you need to be humble and you need to think of others better than yourselves. Now that's easy to do, like if LeBron James is here, right? If LeBron James is here, I'm gonna, hey, Mr. James, hey, it's like, whoa, yeah, man, you're awesome, and let me take you to lunch, which is stupid because he's a zillionaire, right? Why isn't he buying all of us lunch? But I would buy LeBron James some lunch. I would take him to Pitch Pizza. We'd have a great time. And, but you, I have to consider you? You guys? Better than me? Right. Who are you? You're not LeBron James. The Bible's very clear. Boy, if I consider in my home, people, right? My marriage, consider my wife, right? Check this out. Don't be selfish. Here's what if we did this in marriage? Don't be selfish. Don't try to impress each other. Be humble and think of your wife as better than yourself. Or think of your children as better than yourself. Huh? Or think of your neighbor. Okay, We've crossed lines, I know. I'm sorry. Think of your coworkers. All right. That's super, super tough. Sometimes you do things you don't want to do, especially if you're a servant. Especially if you're a servant. Another thing my mom always said was, well, you can live or die. My mom, I don't know, she was trying to cut the drama down in our house. And I don't know if she was a very sensitive person, obviously. Like when our girlfriend broke up with us, she would just say, well, you can live or die. Right? Like, we got to cut the drama here. The worst thing that could happen is what? The worst thing that could happen is what? All right. And I get to choose how I'm going to handle the difficult things that happen in my life, the things that I think are going to devastate me. So when I didn't get on the ball team, or when I didn't get chosen to be on the drama thing, or I didn't get the lead, or I lost my tennis match, or I didn't get invited, well, you can live or die. But it served me really, really well. By the way, I quoted that to my kids all the time. I also learned from my mom the value of hard work, and from my dad as well. Proverbs 14:23 says, work brings profit, but your mere talk leads to poverty. I watched my mom and dad provide for our family. And my dad was a pastor, and my mom was a secretary at another church. Now, in the 60s and 70s, churches really truly believed that they needed to keep the pastors humble by paying them a little bit of money. And we don't want to get the pastors a big head, and we don't want them to have big luxury stuff. And so they didn't pay my dad very much money. He did not earn much money until he left the ministry and began to work for a for-profit organization. And my mom, so if you don't pay the pastor well, you certainly don't pay the secretary well. I did not realize that we were poor. We always had food, and it was always provided for us, and we had a nice home and stuff by that. Well, for instance, I was super embarrassed when I bought my first home in Phoenix, Arizona for $77,000. The reason I was embarrassed was it had 2 bathrooms. I never grew up in a home with 2 bathrooms. I didn't know what that is. So I was constantly fighting for space and time and in the bathroom. And I told Linda that I was I didn't know if I wanted my parents to come see our house because it was nicer than their home that they had worked basically their whole life for. And so that was weird when they came and visited us in Phoenix. It also had a fireplace. I don't know why we needed a fireplace in Phoenix. Truly, there is no wood there, right? Are you going to burn your saguaro? What are you going to do? But they were thrilled that we had this home, and it was great. It had a carport, and and all that. We were thrilled with that house, and it was really a nice place. But I learned from my mom and dad the importance of working, and there was no complaints, and I appreciate their hard work, and still to this day, they're in their 80s, and I guarantee you they outwork me in every area, whether it's cleaning the yard or working, they're amazing people. Another thing in character building was that truth-telling was going to be how we did life. And so my mom was the chief enforcer if we lied. And if it ever got past my mom, that was a huge problem. When she said, just wait till your dad came home, that was a problem. So mom typically took care of things, and if it wasn't solved by then, that was a problem. But the way my mom solved lying was with ivory soap and a washcloth. And she would wash our mouths out with soap. And still to this day, I don't buy ivory soap. It's a horrible thing. But what she was trying to teach us little liars was that we're going to operate with truth, and that builds trust. And we constantly had to deal with those things. I'm not saying this is right or wrong on how to discipline. I'm just saying that I don't like ivory soap. Training almost always involves discipline. Hebrews 12:11, no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. No kidding, it's painful. But afterward, there will be what? A peaceful harvest. Peace, this is the result of a disciplined life in a home as there's peace that's ushered in. The harvest of right living for those who are trained. Train up a child. Training involves discipline. That's why we'll spend a whole section on that next week. Now, this passage of Scripture, train up a child in the way he should go, a lot of commentators believe that that this really has to do with how every kid is unique and they have a unique bent and they have they're drawn in certain ways, and that parents, we're supposed to help our children figure out and discover what they're good at and promote that. Apart from establishing a spiritual heritage and a character building thing, this is a great gift that we get to give to our kids when we help them discover what they're passionate about, what they're good at. Teachers are great at this, by the way. Some of you are school teachers. You look at your children and you go, and kids in your room, you're like, yeah, you're really good at, you've probably even said, you know what, you're great at math. You're an amazing artist. And it just, what that does is, I remember when a professor in college says, Mark, you're a really good speaker. And no, I'm not. And he says, you had a great voice. If you use it, you'll go far. And I thought he was an idiot, but I began to believe that he was looking at my life. And because all I wanted to do in speech class my freshman year was to pass. I was not interested in public speaking. So I got a B and was thrilled. And all of a sudden discovered something in me that nobody else had ever said. John Acuff recently tweeted out that he's an author today because of his third grade teacher. She laminated some of his writings and said that he was good at it. Now he's a prolific author and does amazing work. I think third grade is, like if you're a third grade teacher, way to go. And I think it's a formidable age. When our son Mitch was in the third grade, his teacher put him in charge of discipline in the room. I kid you not. He came home and told us that he was the judge in the classroom. I'm like, what's that mean? He says, well, like if somebody does something wrong, I have to decide what their punishment is. I kid you not. And I said, well, isn't that kind of a problem for you? Like, don't kids get mad at you? And he said this, well, it's not my fault they did those things. I said, well, what do you decide? He says, well, like if they can go to recess or not. You have to decide that? Yeah, like sometimes they have to stay in. He says, basically, I'm the leader. Well, he was. And he was fine with that. Things were black and white for him. It just made sense. And somehow in that third grade year, that teacher discovered that he has some abilities and that leadership qualities. I don't know how she pulled that out of him, but it serves him very, very well in his job today. It's pretty clear. His leadership qualities are immense. I credit that to a wonderful third grade teacher. Mom and Dad, you can do this as well. It just takes time. When you try to understand your children, by the way, the number one complaint that kids have is, my parents don't understand me. Help them discover what makes them come alive. If you do that, you will build confidence and self-esteem. If you help them discover, now it might not be what you like, what you personally like. They might not like fly fishing or motorcycles or the Huskers. I remember when Justin, I think he was 12, was wearing a Texas Longhorn shirt in my house that his grandpa and grandma gave to him. He's proudly displaying the burnt orange. We burned that church. You know the scene when Darth Vader, right at the end, like, okay. I love the fact that Justin lives in Austin, Texas now, and his children wear Husker red. Love that. Because we took that verse at heart where it says, a youngster's heart is filled with foolishness, but you can beat it out of it. Here's what I hope for you moms and dads, that you'll say to your kids, you know, you're really good at this. I think you should try that. And by the way, some of your kids have a natural bent to helping the poor. They naturally invite their friends to church. They just naturally do that. Here's what I'd like you to say. Have you ever thought about being a pastor? I think you'd be a good one. Because that, I believe, will well up in their little heart and they'll realize that they could do something like that. You might say to them, you're really good at singing. I bet you could do what they do at church. Oh yeah, I'd love to do like that. I see kids all the time. What I don't want to have happen is for them to say, you know, Mom and Dad, I think I'd like to be a youth pastor. And then you talk them out of it. I would say, honey, we believe that you'd be amazing at that. And watch their little hearts soar. By the way, we'll probably say that to them as well. Because we observe your kids all the time doing those kind of things. And we'd like to say, you know what, you'd be an amazing kid pastor. I think you should do that. Have you ever thought about being a missionary? Every single time you go on a mission trip, your heart soars. What if you did that full time? That'd be amazing. You'll watch them come alive when you move them into areas of their passion. Proverbs 3:13 says, joyful is the person who finds wisdom, the one who gains understanding. Raising kids, super tough. Super tough. And that's why we're committed to help you. And we'll do our very best to help them fall in love with Jesus and give you tools and resources that we can so that you can teach your children well. All right, let's pray. God, thank you so much for today, for the blessings we receive from the gifts that we have from you, our kids. Help us in this. Some of us are tired and exhausted, frustrated and scared. We're at our wits' end and we don't know exactly what to do. I pray for peace in their home and strength and courage that will be required. Thank you very much for being a good father to us. In Christ we pray. Amen.